time, the American desert has been my beat and my passion. The reasons are many, but really there is only one. In the desert, the chatter of city life fades away and my own thoughts vanish. I get quiet and I hear things. The beating of wings, the scratching of lizard, the crack of tortoise egg, the whisper of stories that want to be told. The wild horse is our greatest partner. Preserving Mustangs is not about being on their backs, but about letting them run wild. Seeing them out there is our birthright and theirs. We're a cowboy nation. Why are we destroying the horse we rode in on? As Will James once wrote, they really belong not to man, but to that country of junipers and sage, of deep arroyos, mesas, and freedom. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Isn't that footage fantastic? So great to see wild horses in the wild where they belong. First, I'd like to say a big thank you to the Autry National Center for having me speak here today. It's really an honor for me because I did some very important research here for my book, in particular about the great frontier warhorse Comanche, who was once wild, and I will tell you his story in a few minutes. And thank you to Lisa Wound for helping to organize this event and the rest of the staff, and also to the staff at the Southwest Museum. And a shout out to Peter Slen at C-SPAN. Happy Norwegian Day. And I know that Norway is home of the amazing breed, the fjord horse, one of the world's oldest breeds. So, okay, here we are, and thank you all for coming today. I'd like to talk about first how and why I wrote Mustang. About 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, in 1998, at Christmas time, I was out in a desert bar in 29 Palms, California, waiting to meet with a source. I was finishing up my previous book, 29 Palms, a true story of murder Marines in the Mojave, about two girls who had been killed after the Gulf War. And I picked up a local paper and saw an item that said 6 wild horses had been gunned down outside Reno. And I was, of course, extremely shocked and horrified. It was a terrible story on its face, and it started to percolate. A couple of days later, there was another item that said 12 horse carcasses had been found in the Virginia range outside Reno, and I was even more horrified by then. Then by the end of that year, Christmas Eve, 1998, as the ball was dropping at Times Square and crowds were gathering to ring in the new year, across the ticker tape blasted the headline, 34 wild horses gunned down in the Virginia range outside Reno. Now, by then, I was just completely mortified, not just because the story was awful on its face, as I mentioned, but I grew up around horses. I have a lifelong affinity and involvement with them. My mother was one of the first women in the country to ride professionally on the racetrack as an exercise boy. She had taught me and my sister to ride when we were quite little. We had horses while my parents were married, and then when they got divorced, her most immediately marketable skill was horseback riding, and we moved from an upper middle class suburb to a working class suburb in Cleveland, Ohio, and she got this job on the track, and she was, at the time, one of the first women in the country to ride professionally on the racetrack. So for the next 5 or 6 years or so, she worked there, and my sister and I would spend a lot of time at the track with her and in the barns and around the horses. And I was always struck by their incredible service and their beauty. And I just remember watching them day in and day out and seeing how they ran their hearts out for little or no reward. And as I got older, I came to the understanding that horses were providing us with a living. They were literally saving my family's life. And at some point, I wanted to repay the favor. I didn't really know how or when I might do that, but it was something that was on my mind then as I was growing up, and you know, a seed that grew over time. Then when I was finishing up 29 Palms and I heard this terrible tale, everything started to come together for me, and I knew that the story of the wild horse on this continent would be my next book. Then there was one more thing that kicked the whole thing into overdrive for me. A few days after learning that the 34 wild horses had been killed, there had been an arrest, and two of the men arrested were Marines, and one was stationed at 29 Palms. So again, here was one more thing that just showed me that this was a story I had to write next, and here I am 10 years later with my book, Mustang. Along this journey, I found out so many incredible things. Let me start, first of all, with the fact that horses are America's gift to the world. As I said, I grew up around horses, and it's something that I did not learn as a kid, and maybe some of you have heard that when you were growing up, but I didn't, and it was one of many things that proved to me as I was doing my research that the story of the wild horse on this continent is just one of our big suppressed stories, oddly, because the horse is our greatest partner. You know, without the horse, we have no America. The horse evolved here in the West, originated here 55 million years ago. At the time, it was the size of a fox terrier, and it's known as the dawn horse. It's hard to picture a horse being that small, but it was. And over time, of course, it got bigger and faster, and by the time the Ice Age rolled in, it had become the big-hearted fleet athlete of the plains that we know and admire today, very similar to the wild horse of today. It was heading north across the Bering Land Bridge then, 12 to 14,000 years ago, and it had populated the rest of the world. And meanwhile, it went extinct here. And it wasn't until the 16th century that it returned to its ancestral homeland. And its return came about because the conquistadors decided to come here and find gold. My first chapter is called The Horse's Return, and it's about their amazing and treacherous journey back to the land of its origin. And to research this chapter, I went back into some of the old conquistador chronicles, and I found out that Hernando Cortez had a scribe on board who loved horses and wrote down, there were 16 horses on board with Hernando Cortez in his first voyage to Mexico. That's all it took, 16 horses to launch the conquest. And this scribe of Cortez wrote down each of their names and talked about their personalities and really provided a lot of information, and that was kind of one of the foundations for my research in this chapter.